Hello, seekers. It's Pat the Sales Engineer again. And this time around, we're going to tackle some more of the psychology of selling. And one of the things that I find very straight to the point is the work of a gentleman by the name of Cialdini, who's a doctor in the mid 80s going after the psychology of persuasion. Now, his book, I can find the name of the book here, The Principles of Persuasion, is a cornerstone for people who are more serious about sales and a little bit more interested in how to become more efficient. His book, Robert B. Cialdini, Cialdini, in 1984, is called Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. Now, he's got a follow-up book to that, and there's six basic fundamental points to this I won't say theory, but certainly this methodology. And we're going to go over them really quickly, but as we've discussed before, we're all selling. So you can look at these as things you would use yourself, things that you notice in others. So I more often than not will notice when certain effects, certain techniques, certain methodologies are being used by other people. I just tend to be observant and looking at how things are being done. How are people using this or that? So much of the methodologies I've created have been just from observing it, things done well, observing things done poorly, and finding a way that's not exactly the perfect way, but certainly I try to come up with methodologies very similar to what the doctor here has done that hold true in any situation. Now, they might not be applicable in everyone, but at least they hold true. So he originally had what were called the Six Principles of Influence. And what I'll do here is just go through these really quick here. Trying out a new eraser. Yay, look at that, huh? Works good for now. So what we have are the let's just call them what they are, the Six Principles of Persuasion. Now, as a sales engineer, you're probably sitting here going, well, why in the world do I care about selling and coercion and influence? There's a couple of really good reasons for this. When you are demonstrating, when you're doing a demo, when you are trying to get your kids to clean their room, when you are trying to get the best deal on something, whatever it is, we are all on one side or the other of a sales process. And as you might imagine, as engineers, we tend to look at everything from the perspective of its most fundamental parts, the building blocks, the foundations, and then look at how the current situation or whatever it is we're observing or experimenting with has been built up on those foundational key principles. So I promise this will not be a waste of your time. So let's start out with the first one, And the first one is reciprocity. Reciprocalness. What this means is I give you something, you give me something. I have a Patreon page, and those that have YouTube videos that they use to promote different things. What all of them have in mind is if I over here can, wow, oh, this little marker decided to go pretty nuts. If I'm over here, wow, it's almost like it was under pressure. If I'm over here and I offer you something, whatever it is, any type of perceived value, you over here will feel compelled to give something back. The good example of this is in the case of, say, YouTube videos and things like that, where you give me viewership, you give me your time, your feedback, whatever, in exchange for information that I'm giving you. So I give you information, you in return give me something. Here's an interesting example of how this goes. If and some of you have probably already heard about this. There's this idea, and a great example of this is with tips. There have been a lot of studies because it's a nice controlled environment with restaurants and with tips. So here's what happens. Let's say the waiter or waitress, the wait staff, and you, at the end of the meal, regardless of the service that you got during the meal, there is a sequence that happens when they have your bill and they're going to give you the bill. So when they give you the bill, oftentimes you'll see that you'd get like a mint or something. Well, one little mint, now I'll put it over here, equals a 3% increase in the tip versus not having anything. Let's see if I just want to make sure I'm not drawing outside the area that I have here. Oh, okay, good. So you figure, okay, that's pretty good. That's why they throw the mints around. But if you get 2 mints, and you know, hopefully my green is, wow, man, this thing is really, this is putting out a lot of ink. If we have 2 mints, somebody just brings it to you and says, oh, here's 2 mints. Now, I'm talking about not one person, 1 mint, but a mint for each person, right? So you wouldn't have 2 people with 1 mint. So what happens is, it doesn't double, it actually quadruples to 14% if, and again, this is for each person, okay? Just keep things clear. So you figure, oh, okay, maybe if they keep bringing more and more and more, everything will be fine. No, the tips never go up from the 2 mint level here, no matter how many more you give. But there is a way to get almost twice as much, and see if you haven't seen this tactic of reciprocity. The waiter provides you with 1 mint, let's say, and they start to walk away, and they pause and turns back and says, you know what, for you nice people, here's an extra. You've been really good. So it's still 2 mints, but it's 23% increase in the tips because of the little acknowledgement that you have been good versus just simply throwing them on a tray and walking away. See how many times you see this? This is reciprocity in action. If you're watching YouTube videos and you like them and you're getting a lot out of them, and the author has a Patreon page where they say click here to subscribe and to get alerts, you are much more likely, if you feel as though you're getting something, to give something in exchange than you are simply to just simply be interested in something. It works very, very well. A $5 check, this is a survey that was done in 1992. A $5 check that was included with a survey produced more responses than the promise of $50 after responding. And there are links that I can put in the bottom here you can find, as well as just simply Googling the 6 principles here, and they've been expanded on, but basically the 6 principles. Think about that. You give me money, I don't have to do the survey, but I've got a check right now for $5 in my hand. I fill out the survey. But if I'm told I'll get $50 if I respond, people don't care. They just won't respond. Junk. They don't have the instant gratification of getting something. It's the idea of feeling indebted. Okay? So our first principle is reciprocity. Man, oh man, did that stuff go on there. Holy cow, look at that green. Man, I gotta be careful with that stuff. Where's my handy dandy? So, how can we use reciprocity in software sales or high ticket sales as a sales engineer? Well, one of the ways we do it is we give what I call free consulting. Free consulting is this meeting, this demo, this whatever it is, especially in the cases of a proof of concept or a pilot where you're using their data. I'm going to teach you something that odds are you didn't know. I'm going to teach you and give you something that you'll walk away from the meeting going, I didn't know that. A dog and pony show on the other side, where somebody just broadcasts at you, you don't learn anything except something about their product, and that does not help you in your daily life, etc. So we always want to be giving people information. Pilots and proof of concepts are, like I said, a little bit of an exception because they are using their data, right? So they're seeing their own data. They have a vested interest in what's going on. So one of the other things that you can do with reciprocity is has to do, and this is, it can be simply get and give. There's another interesting aspect of this, reject and retreat, sometimes it's called. What this means is, if you're making a large request of somebody, you really want a lot, and they say, well, no, I can't do that. If you then make a small request as a concession, you're 3 times more likely to get that request than if you asked for the small thing right away. So imagine you ask a question. Can I have this? And the person says, no, of course not. But if I then ask, can I then have this? And they go, yes. Now, the point here is that if I had not asked for this first, and I had not retreated or been turned down, or it had not worked, I would be 3 times less likely to get what I was after in the first place. So what this means is, can we get you, Mr. Prospect, Mrs. Prospect, can we get you to commit to our demo and get through the training and everything by this week? I say, no way. There's no way I can get that done in a week. All right, I'll tell you what, how about if we give you a little bit of help, a little bit of training, we put somebody on site, we do a little bit of video conference training, that kind of thing. Would 2 weeks be enough time? Yeah, sure, I can see that if you help us out a little bit. We wanted this in the first place because we never want a demo or a pilot or a proof of concept or anything to have any chance whatsoever to have a failure, a lack of performance, or have that prospect say something bad or have a bad impression. Even if it isn't what they want, even if they don't end up buying it at all, we want them to always have a good, favorable impression with what it was we were talking about. Well, what's the best way to mess that up? Well, the best way to mess up is to simply throw them at a URL or hand them a disk, and I've seen this in companies I've worked for, and say, let us know if you have any problems. Let us know if you have any questions. And of course, their question is, what do I do with this? They got to stop what they're doing just to try to figure this out. You're not even willing to help them out. So the idea is you say, here you go, give them a firm deadline. You know they're going to say no. You bring them down to where you want here. And this is not negotiating. Negotiating is totally different. Negotiating has something to do with the perceived value versus what you think is a bargain. Not the same. So these are the 2 forms of reciprocity. And you should be able to see these pretty readily in your life, in things that you do. The second thing is scarcity, and this one should be like most of what we talk about. It's obvious, but it's, if you don't go over it all the time, it loses its presence in your mind. You don't have it at the fore of your conversation. Scarcity has to do with, if you think that something is going away, if you think that there's hardly any of them, you are more likely to want to have that thing. People are much more sensitive, let's put it this way, to potential losses than to potential gains. Therefore, opportunities seem more valuable to us when they are less available. So imagine you're selling the opportunity. You're giving them an opportunity to have what you're selling. It seems a lot more valuable to them if it's less likely. Have you ever seen things that sold for $1? Or have you seen the punishment that a murderer was getting, not a murderer, but it was in a car accident. The sentence they were given was every week they had to write $1 check to the family. Just $1. Had nothing to do with the money. You see? A salesperson can easily secure a commitment to a purchase, an item, when it is presumed that the item is unavailable, while the information that a desired item is in good supply can make it less attractive. College students had a greater desire to read a book, imagine that, actual books, and a greater belief that they would enjoy the book when they were informed that it was for adults only or restricted or really was for someone more mature. People become more sympathetic to arguments when they learn that the argument has been censored, even when they have never been exposed to the justification for the censorship. Oh, I want to have something that not everybody has. This is the cookie jar effect, right? You have a cookie jar and you ask someone to try the cookie, and in one case, the cookie jar is full. In the other case, there's only 1 or 2 cookies left in the cookie jar. Wershel Lee and Adewole in 75 said that people given a cookie from a full jar enjoy it less and report that it is lower quality than the same exact cookie from an almost empty jar. These things don't make sense, right? We're rational, we're thinking about this, and they don't make any sense, but they are provable, and they have every place when you're in the game of persuasion. So, if something has high scarcity, what does it typically mean when you're talking about consumable goods or software or services? It means that you started out with a bunch, but they're going quick. Why are they going quick? Because other people are using them. We put two and two together. We're given two facts, and we fill in the middle with whatever supports our particular desire, not our view, but our desire. I believe, even if I don't tell you, I believe that these are in higher demand, and therefore I want them. Oh, and they're so much better. There's no kidding. That's why there weren't any there. Scarcity. It's very simple. If you see something for sale at the market, and if you ever notice like all the shelves are cleared and there's only a couple left, even if it's something you don't need, you're going to go get it. Why? You never know if it's ever going to be on sale again. Isn't that interesting? So let's go for our next guy. The next one is authority. And this is really strange. There's a study that was done whereby a person went through a train with a policeman. And the policeman wasn't with them. It wasn't, they weren't involved with the policeman, but there's somebody dressed up in a police outfit behind them. And whenever that person asked if they could have someone's seat, they always got up and moved. Not an empty seat. We're talking about people getting up and moving out of their seat. The perception was, in the presence of authority, I must comply. Now, where does this have any impact on us? Well, school is where we're taught to obey. So we have this innate social craving to not buck the system. So when we see somebody who's dressed nicely on the news, so we're watching our TV screen and we've got somebody there and they're reading the news, we think they're authoritative. They must know what they're talking about. They're on the boob tube and they're dressed nice. They could be in their underwear underneath there. We don't know. But authority has a very convincing psychological effect on us when we are taught in schools to obey. And school isn't about learning, it is about obeying, being peaceful. So, have you ever been to a sales call where the rep is wearing bad clothing? No, of course not. Whatever level the prospect has for professionalism, or just to put it simply, dress, right? Wherever the prospect is, where are we? If that's them, where's us? We are here. You're always one notch above, whatever the notch is, those that you are visiting. You've heard me say this before, but this is the first chance I've had an opportunity to an opportunity to explain to you why that's the case. Why do you go formal, not formal, but a suit, to a business casual client? Why do you go business casual to a casual client? Because we want them to look up. We don't want to be their pal, and we don't want them to look down on us like somebody that we're less serious about what they're doing than they are, right? We don't want to be on the same level because then they're going to question. Psychologically, they always question. They say, well, we could do that because we can do whatever you can do. Whereas here, the perception is, and I always wondered about this, by the way, whenever I was starting out and I would see the sales guys in good dress, good cars and everything, I could never figure out why. I thought that if a sales rep showed up looking like they had a lot of money and I equated good clothing, good grooming, it's buying lunch, whatever, with money. I figured that somebody would see that as, you're making too much money on me. You're trying to rip me off. All you're going to do is take your money and spend it on yourself. You make too much profit. That's what I thought. Ends up, that's not the case. Ends up, psychologically, we trust people better off than ourselves. We trust people who are rich. We follow people like the Kardashians that are useless and are interested and engaged in everything they do because they're famous. They're better looking than we are. They're whatever. So we have this herd kind of social DNA defect that makes us get out of the way if somebody next to a train conductor asks if they can have the seat. No consequence, just asks. And we go, sure, absolutely. We see somebody telling us to stop. We stop. There's studies where people would move out of line if somebody in a uniform that was completely different than any other uniform, like an elevator worker's uniform, if they asked them if they could take their place in line, things like that, people would do it. They don't know how to challenge authority. People were taught to obey. This is really, really important, and why you want to look good, you want to talk good, you don't want to sound as though you're even at their level. You want to be somebody that they can look up to, even though they're not overtly doing it. Again, this is persuasion. I'm not telling you to do what I say. I'm making you come up with that solution on your own, taking the easiest path. We're talking about people taking the easiest, less troubled path toward your destination. Remember, we talked about this, how sales works. Having someone come up with your idea. And that's how authority plays so well into what you and I do every day. You wouldn't think it would, but it does. The next thing, consistency. Consistency. What do you like? Thick or thin, or what kind of consistency are we talking about here? Well, every time somebody complies with a request, and this kind of goes in with authority, I suppose, and a little bit with reciprocity. Every time we comply with a request, we are more likely to comply again. People were asked to place a small "Be a Safe Driver" card in their windows. This is back in 1966. They did this test, psychological test, Friedman and Fraser. In 66, they said, would you please put this little card in your window that says, be a safe driver. We're really trying to promote good driving. People were 60% more likely to comply when 2 weeks later they were asked to put a very large, poorly lettered, ugly, drive carefully billboard in their front yard than when they were first approached and said, hey, can you put this big ugly sign in your front yard? And they said, no way. But they were 60% more likely when they had already given a very small concession. So consistency has to do with things like if we comply with a trivial request, it modifies our attitude and self-concept, and we will tend to be more consistent with that type of action. So let's say I'm trying to get someone to change the way they do business, and that's because I'm trying to sell them a piece of software with a rep, and this piece of software is going to cause them to change the way they do things. So that means a lot of the work they've already done has to go away. They have to migrate. And by the way, the whole time they can't shut the business down to do this. So the idea is tribal cultures in which members submit to the most dramatic and stringent initiation ceremonies are those with the greatest group solidarity. And you see this with college fraternities. You certainly see it with the Masons. These are the things that are asking you to sacrifice something, your time, your money, it could be whatever. Have you ever heard it said that free has no value? If I give you something for free, you will be very skeptical of it. You will probably never adopt it or never try it or never do it, whatever it happens to be. But if I charge you $1 for that same exact thing, it will have tremendously greater chance of being adopted, read, understood, and investigated. Simply because you have invested. So consistency has to do with getting people to nod, right? Many groups who are going to ask you to sign petitions, they actually don't do anything with the petitions themselves. Once you've signed it, your self-concept is your self-concept of how you now feel about an issue is modified so that now they know they can approach you for other things. They don't even use the surveys. They don't even use the petition. You know, I need 30,000 signatures. That's not what they're actually doing when they knock on your door. There might be some, but it's a waste of time. What they're doing is they're saying, I now have somebody who's not only thinking like me, and we talk about the politics of persuasion and conversation in another video, but I've gotten them to give me a small concession by signing this meaningless charter, this petition. If they're going to do that small thing, they'll do a big thing. And that's why I said it kind of had to do with the reciprocity, but not really. It had to do with the consistency of a particular action. So if I'm trying to sell somebody something, I'm going to get them to try a pilot or a demo, right? Which may have very little dollars to it. Well, how about if we set you up with a demo of this, or even a pilot, or just a proof of concept to prove whatever it is? Oh, okay, we'll do that first. Now I've got your buy-in to do a much bigger purchase. This is not the same as the reject and retreat, where we had intentionally wanted the small thing. We got the big thing in there so you'd feel guilty about telling me no and give me the little thing instead of me asking for the little thing right off the bat. Okay, I'm not trying to dwell too much on any of these, to keep everybody lighthearted. Liking. What does that have to do with anything? Have you ever heard me say about 100 times that people who are right mostly agree with me? What that means is that if you can agree with me, then you will find me attractive. If I agree with you, if I don't like what you think, I don't like you as a person. But if I like the way you're Republican, you're a Democrat, great, so am I. You're a good egg. That actually works. If you are in a situation where you see a bunch of Republican stuff everywhere in the United States, and you want to get through to this really tough boss, mention some Republican stuff, mention some conservative news, mention some, hey, this is just like that, how about that? You're just using your powers of observation to see what's around you and to get them to loosen up and to the point where they like you enough that they can listen to the message. This isn't coercion. Coercion is forcing somebody. Most people think that persuasion and coercion have no place in selling, but because we're all selling all the time, I can't see how that's possible. People prefer to say yes to requests of people they know and they like. We're back to the authority. I know this. I know this announcer. I know this comedian. I see them every night. Therefore, their views I'm much more open to. Increasing the degree to which you are liked by someone will increase the probability that they will comply with your request. We like people better and believe them more when they are more attractive, similar to us, they like us, and are familiar to us, even engaged in a cooperative effort with us. Hey, we're both Masons. Hey, we both give to this particular charity. Or are associated with things we like music. We both listen to the same kind of music. Or, and here's a really good one, if you really want to get somebody to like you, do it over, you guessed it, food. There's a study in 1938 about this. Another example for liking, in-home Tupperware parties. The strength of the social bond between the host and the attendee is twice as likely to determine purchasing decisions as preference for the actual product. The Guinness Book of World Records, the greatest car salesman sent out monthly greeting cards to each of his previous customers, which read, "I like you." Study participants reported a higher level of agreement with political statements they were exposed to while eating. That's why the old TV dinners in the 60s and 70s, that's why the news is on then, even though they were not aware of what messages have been presented, like, TV in the background, subliminal stuff, all that. The commercials that you hear when you're not really paying attention, TV still pounds them into your head. Even though you weren't actually paying strict attention, because food was being served, and food is a gratification, you took the other things that created that atmosphere or were along with that atmosphere as favorable. So always take your prospects out to lunch. Sales guys learn this day one. That's selling 101. Consensus is our last guy. Consensus. What do we mean by consensus? Well, consensus means that we tend to be like herd animals. We tend to be things like we determine what is correct by finding out what other people think is correct. So if everybody else is jumping off the cliff, I'm going to jump off the cliff too. The consensus is that this is a good idea. How many industries have we seen, like banking, where they are so slow to adopt anything? They want to see what all their other competitors are doing before they decide what they want to do. Right? It's particularly true in the presence of uncertainty, obviously, because that's risk. Risk is uncertainty. We're particularly prone to follow the lead of people we perceive as similar to us, just exactly like we said. If A and B consider themselves to be in the same situation, the same market, the same whatever, and A goes ahead and buys this software, adopts it for their accounting, their selling, their whatever, a welding machine, B will say, okay, that's something, even if they don't know if A is satisfied or not. This is why you see on web pages, and a lot of times on PowerPoints, you'll see the logo page, right? Where the logos are all of the folks that have already used or considered using or don't use it anymore, the thing that you're selling. So the reason you do all the logos isn't to show that there's a lot. The reason you do a lot of logos is so you don't have to do a bunch of different logo pages. So this one's shoes, this one's manufacturing, right? This one's plastics, this one's telecom. because we're lazy, right? So we have this one presentation. We don't have to slice and dice our presentation for each and every different market. That's why you see a logo page. That's all. The use of shopping carts didn't catch on. This was in Kansas City. I watched a show on this. They talked about how the inventor of the shopping cart knew that this was going to work. And this is back in the 60s. And he noticed that the problem was this. People would only hold as so many groceries as they could carry home, and even one bag, and that's all they would buy. And he knew that they wanted more because they would come back for different whatever. So he bought these and designed rather these shopping carts that had wheels on them, and people would push them up and down the aisle. He put them all up at the front of the store, and he said, "Here, would you like to use a cart?" People, no way, some kind of weird thing. Well, what happened was all the carts sat there not being used until he had, and he hired, true story, models to walk around the store pushing stuff in the carts. That's all. They weren't buying anything. They were just pushing the carts around. Boy, it's a hottie there, huh? Yeah, it's woohoo. So what happened was people saw someone doing something with a good-looking person and said, well, I want to be a good-looking person. Now, how many times have you seen this consensus psychology, right? Have you ever seen the commercials during sporting events where there's always the hot girls and the big fat guys drinking beer? Because if you drink beer, hot girls like you with your big fat beer belly. Or if you see models, female models in makeup, it makes you think, well, I could look like that. And then it's a crime what they do to women with that kind of pressure. So that's all it took, and they took off. And he ended up patenting it and selling it. The guy made a bunch of money just because he was trying to get people to buy more stuff at his store. The publication of news stories about suicides increase the number of suicides and fatal accidents among members of similar groups. How many times have we seen a school shooting followed by another school shooting? The Me Too's, right? Now, I'm not saying that having people commit suicide or people killing themselves or doing stupid things and shooting people up is good. What I'm saying is that it's an innate part of who we are and who our prospects and customers and buyers are. So they want to be unique just like everybody else. So all you have to do is understand that part when you're going and describing what you do. So in my usual very ad hoc, ugly, scattered way, we've talked about reciprocity, how we got the little thing by asking for the big thing first. Have you ever heard this in sales? Put your foot in the door, then drive the tank through. So I use this when I say, well, let me sell you something small, even though the scope has gotten gigantic. Let me sell you a small engagement. We talked about a free consulting thing for 2 weeks and all that. Fix your hardest problem. That really, really works. And once we've engaged in a complete sales cycle and you've paid and I've given it to you and you're a happy guy, you're willing now to bite the big nugget. Don't come at somebody with a discrete sales opportunity that's huge right off the bat. Scarcity. Wow, these are going like hotcakes. Who doesn't want hotcakes that are going like hotcakes, right? People buy from those that they feel are smarter than them, that are more authoritative than them, more rich than them, or even just more like them. We always assume that other people know more than we do, even if they're in the same situation, because we don't know what they know. That mystery makes us automatically, what if they know more than me? People don't go around in reality saying, I know more than everybody else. In reality, especially in a buyer-seller market, people are very insecure. Consistency. right? Always keep to the same exact thing. If they're a Republican, you make Republican comments. You don't have to say you're a Republican, you just make comments. Consistency. What's a big part of this that we covered before? Pacing. Go back and look at the videos where we talked about pacing in conversation and presentation. People who are right agree with me. People who are right and smart are just like me. People who talk like I talk, dress like I dress, are more like me. And I like those people because I am a darn good looking person. Liking somebody is right behind it. I like famous people. Well, this is why famous people give their stupid opinions about politicians running for office. Like, why do we care? Musicians coming out and saying they believe in this thing or that thing because they have Twitter followers. It's crazy. They have no business doing that and abusing that fame, but they do it constantly. And concessions. All right. I hope you found some of this worthwhile. It all has to do with world domination. And these are the 6 principles of persuasion. I'm going to put a couple of links down in the description to a couple of pages that I used just for some notes while I was doing this. And I was able to mix in a few other things that we've talked about in previous videos. And all those studies and stuff that I was talking about, they're all part of this as well, these different studies that I've cited. That's it. Don't forget, we're all constantly selling. Just a question of how good you're going to be at it. That's it. And thank you very, very much.